Hello, good morning, everybody. On the live here, joining me today will be Candace, who is our expert in what it is that we're going to be talking about today, which is PPE, etc., etc. So I'm just going to get Candace online and get a few people to join the live. If anybody does miss the live, you will be able to watch it again in a replay anyway. So we're really hoping that we can help you guys out today with some of your just Candace. Okay.
Hi.
Yes, hi Candace, how are you doing?
Oh, thanks, and you?
All right, thanks.
We just get me in a good spot here.
Yes, so a bit less light behind you is great.
Fine, but I'm gonna have to hold it.
Being here today. So I know there's not a lot of people yet, and there might be some that will still come a bit later. So
No problem.
I wanted to just start by telling everybody that we were actually doing this live through a Facebook group called South Africa. And this was really started to showcase styles of South African talent to consumers. So in other words, the group itself has consumers, brands, stylists, nail techs, all kinds of people on there. So we've got professionals and we've got consumers. So it's a very good platform to be on and a good place to showcase our hairstyle. Obviously, when the whole lockdown issue happened, things changed a little bit. I don't know if you've got a little bit of noise from your side there, Candace.
No, I don't, not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, that's all right. Maybe it was me. There you go. And so, yes, and so it evolved obviously when the lockdown happened, and it wasn't what it first started out as, but it was a fantastic place. I was so happy that it was a platform where we could actually help people out. What a weird time it was and has been up until now, where nobody knew if we were going to come back, when we were going to come back. And then there was talk of protocols and PPE, and I think there was quite a bit of confusion and that kind of thing. So what we want to do today is run through some of what you need to do. So between Candace and I, she is the expert. She'll tell you a bit about what she offers, and we do help people put together their PPE and do their risk assessment and that kind of thing. So we welcome any questions at this stage, and if we don't get your question, we will answer it later on in the comments. So I just want to ask Candace if you can just tell us what it is that you're qualified in and a little bit of what you've done until now.
Thank you, Ush. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes.
So I have what we call a SAMTRAC health and safety qualification. It is a very well sought after qualification in South Africa as well as internationally. And what it entails is a series of health and safety courses that are done over a 10-day period and has a very high expectancy in terms of a pass mark. So a SAMTRAC qualification is usually taken on by somebody who turns health and safety into their profession. It's not just a volunteer type of work, but it's your profession. So health and safety is my profession. What this also enables me to do is to offer risk assessments. So what that means is, in terms of SAMTRAC, I have been sufficiently trained on how to do varying risk assessments across many different industries.
Okay.
I've also gone on to complete my COVID workplace preparedness training with the Labour Guide, which I've just also recently done about 2.5, 3 weeks ago, and I received my certificate of completion. So what that training is specifically around and why it's applicable to what we're doing now is, as it speaks for itself, it's very much around the COVID. So in terms of that training, it was very focused on the Department of Labor and Occupation and their requirements of every South African employer, as well as the expectations on the employee. So basically anybody residing in the country, what are the protocols? What are the expectations in terms of managing COVID?
Okay.
So what I then did is I have married not only the Department of Labor and Occupations requirements, which is a national requirement, but also the protocols of the EOHCB and of SASP. So there are many areas where the protocols overlap, and as most people will know, fairly recently there was a document produced which is about 87 pages. It looked very overwhelming initially, but a lot of it was a lot of inside information, clarity around COVID and general management. So a good portion of the document was about information. The second half were the actual protocols. Subsequent to that, a new gazette has been published, which is about 16 pages, which speaks solely of the protocols for the hair care industry, the beauty industry, as well as the tattooing, both in formal and informal areas.
Yes.
So
sorry,
the service that
also, just quickly before you carry on, there's that you had a history in your background of working within the industry. So I know you have worked for some of the manufacturers and you've worked with salons and stuff before. So it's not an industry that's something that you don't know about, you know, which is very, very handy for what we're doing.
Yeah. I have experience in the hair care industry. I've been a sales rep in the industry. I've done brand and marketing management in the hair care industry as well. Always been a passion, but I've never really quite got myself to going further in the industry. But I can support you through the health and safety side.
Yeah. I'm so glad someone's got their head screwed on with that, because yeah, it's not really my forte. Anything that seems legal can seem overwhelming, and I think everybody really appreciates the support. So yeah, sorry if you want to carry on with what you were doing, then we can ask some questions if we don't get to some of them.
Sure. So just some clarity around what I'm able to offer is there needs to be an understanding out there that there is a requirement from the Department of Labor and Occupation, and there is a requirement from the hair care and beauty industry in terms of COVID protocols. And like I mentioned a little earlier, that they do in some instances overlap. There are some other areas that I have looked through the hairdressing protocols and they're not mentioned, but this is where people need to be a bit more clued up. Is just because they're not mentioned, an employer cannot then claim that they didn't know about the protocols per se. It's a little bit of a tricky area and it can seem a little bit unfair, but this is why I'm here, is to answer these questions and to, from an employer's perspective, give more clarity around what the Department of Labor and Occupation requires for COVID.
Yes, okay, yeah, there's some grey areas.
Yeah, so for instance, the Department of Labor requires that there be a cleaning register. In the hairdressing protocols, the cleaning is mentioned, but it's not said in the protocols that it needs to be on a register or you have to have some sort of proof that you are actually cleaning. So what happens in these instances where the confusion is going to come in is that if an inspector from the Department of Labor and Occupation comes and visits a salon and he says or she says, "Where is your COVID management plan?" The person in the hairdresser or in the store may panic because they don't necessarily know what is the COVID management plan. What they're saying that they have the sanitizers, they have the masks, they're following the hairdressing protocols, which is good and is expected. But the inspector himself will be looking for additional measures that have been taken. And these additional measures translate into the paperwork and the documentation that we will be looking for. And this is where I have married the two COVID protocol aspects.
Okay. Okay, so that sounds brilliant. So not only do they have to have all their paperwork in order, they need to have control. They have to have somebody in the salon that's appointed and that is in control of certain aspects that needs to happen at certain times of the day or certain times of the week or of the month, and they have to keep stock of all sorts of things, and as well as control the people coming in and out the door and getting their information, that kind of thing.
That is correct. So that person will be titled as the appointed COVID manager. There is a specific document that needs to be completed and kept on file that the owner of the salon officially and legally appoints the COVID manager. So when an inspector comes into the salon, they're going to ask for the appointed COVID manager, and they're going to want to see the supporting document that states that Joe Soap is the appointed COVID manager. They will not accept that randomly you point to someone and say, oh, but this is the COVID manager. They want to see the documentation. And this is where it starts to get tricky, is because if you don't know what documentation is needed and how it needs to be completed and when, if you are inspected, which I have a sinking feeling that this particular industry will be in a way an easy target, and I'm hoping that I'm wrong on this, people are going to be asking for that documentation.
Okay, so just briefly, what could happen if they do come in and ask for that? They will just be fined.
Well, as we already know, some salons that were operating during the lockdown have received a 50,000 Rand fine.
Yeah.
So the opportunity for being fined is there.
Yes.
We must not think that even though we're putting protocols in place and we're doing what we think we should be doing, we aren't at risk of getting a fine.
Yes.
What the consequences are is, yes, to have to receive a fine, and in some instances, which could happen, they would actually close the salon in the very moment. So your clients would get up from the chair with their cape on and walk out the salon. So that is very extreme. However, I can't say at this particular stage what would warrant an action like that, but the business will definitely anticipate a financial penalty.
Yes, and we don't know. There's a lot of unknowns throughout the whole COVID thing, so we don't know for sure. So moving on to some other things. So there's a process that happens when people come through the door, and I think what stylists and salon owners will want to know is probably a kind of a list of what is the best PPE. There's so many adverts out there. There's thermometers. Then someone says you don't need to use a thermometer. There's shoe covers, but you don't need to use shoe covers. You know what I'm saying? You need to use the 3-ply mask. If they bring their own mask, is that okay? Do they need to use a disposable one? Are those things you can give us some insight into now?
Sure.
Yeah.
No, sure. I'm very happy to do that. So let's just start with the basics. We all know that hand sanitizer is a top priority, and that it needs to be at least a 70% isopropyl alcohol content. What is important, and this is something that gets covered in the actual health and safety file which I supply, is what we call the MSDS document. That is your medical safety data sheet, MSDS.
Okay.
That will be part of the inspection of your file, and that has to accompany the sanitizer that you purchase to prove that it does have 70% alcohol, as well as what other ingredients are in the product that render it to be effective. So hand sanitizer is a definite.
So when somebody
In the
orders
current protocol,
sorry,
beg your pardon?
Supplier, do they have to ask them to see the paperwork on that, or is it printed on the bottle?
Yes. Sometimes it's printed on the bottle, but there is a scope of information that needs to be visible and to be supplied. If the purchaser buys if the salon buys directly from a supplier, they should be asking this, and they need to keep that on hand.
Okay, it's for the documentation of it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so that's the sanitizer. So, all right. So that gets sprayed.
So that's the sanitizer.
Is that just for hands, or do you use the same one on a countertop?
Right. So we are all very aware at the moment that things are really expensive, and the hair care industry has taken a huge knock in terms of revenue. So hand sanitizer can be used solely for hands. It can also be used on immediate countertops. Okay. However, in the gazetted protocols, you can also use bleach, which can be watered down, but in a specific ratio. This is
okay. So maybe take a little step back if you can remember where we were.
Sure.
Yes.
So what I was talking about was the sanitizer versus the bleach, and where you should use those two chemicals.
Yes.
So just to recap, the sanitizer should be used on hands and smaller surfaces, maybe some smaller countertops, the plastic screen in between yourself and the client, as well as maybe your smaller countertops, hands, and also in the new protocols, I see that they're asking that the salon personnel use those clear face masks.
Okay.
Okay. So they're mentioning that you can use the fabric face mask, but they're saying that the salon personnel should be using those face shields, and you would use hand sanitizer to clean both sides of the face shield.
That makes sense.
So that would your bleach derivative would be used on your larger surfaces. So for instance, your floors, you can use it on your handles of your doors, the door frames, any shelves, as well as to go to your bigger fabric suppliers and look for the thick plastic, which can be cut into different shapes, and actually line your chairs with that, and then wipe the plastic, because over a period of time, whether you're using sanitizer or whether you're using bleach, those chemicals are going to wreak havoc on the leather of the chairs. Whether it's real leather or not, it's going to either discolor the fabric or actually break down the integrity of the fabric, and it's going to start cracking.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Especially seeing as though that the Department of Labor and Occupation are asking that areas be cleaned 3 times a day. Wow. So that's at the start of the day, midday, and at the end of the day. The current hairdressing protocols are saying only at the beginning and the end of the day.
But also it would have to be between every client, wouldn't it? In some places.
Wouldn't go into your kitchen area and clean that between every client. However, the department is saying those types of areas need to be cleaned 3 times a day.
Wow, so there's quite a lot.
Yeah, so to clarify the cleaning, you're going to start your cleaning before any clients arrive. You're going to clean the entire salon, your shelves, chairs, handles, door frames, countertops, consoles, all your equipment, any drawer that your eye lays on gets cleaned. Okay.
Yes.
Then when the client comes in, you are to wash your hands before and after each client, and the client is to either sanitize or wash their hands with soap and water before commencing. I don't see how washing with the soap and water is going to be particularly like easy to do if they're already outside the salon. So the most sensible thing is just have them sanitize their hands before coming into the salon.
Yes.
So let's go back to the PPE because then we can finish that off. So
Yes.
we spoke about the sanitizer. We've spoken briefly about the masks. That needs to be a 3-ply mask. And in the safety file that I provide, where there is a guideline as to what masks and what fabric is acceptable.
Yes.
Then, so everyone wears a mask of sorts. Actual latex gloves are no longer required. It's far more effective to be washing your hands and to be using hand sanitizer. If you are using gloves for any reason, they need to be removed properly and disposed of properly after each application. So you don't wear them for the whole day, you wear them per client.
Yes.
Okay. Then moving on, and then the salon employee would have a face shield and the client would have a mask. All right. That mask needs to stay on all the time. So if you're going to be cutting around the hair around the ears, the person then needs to put their hand over the mask, covering their nose and their mouth, and then unclip the elastics around the ears, still holding the mask over the face. As an added precaution, what I would do in that instance is if they have had to touch their face, bearing in mind, and we've all experienced it, that continual breathing in and out of the fabric mask,
Yes.
there's going to be some sort of moisture and possible saliva particles that you're now touching over your mouth. I would then have the person sanitize their hands while they're sitting in the chair after having replaced the mask and back over the ears.
Okay.
Okay. Because bearing in mind, you've now had direct contact with the fabric that you've been breathing in and out of for the last 10 or 15 minutes.
Yes.
Right. So that's the face shields and the masks. Then in terms of the cutting capes, a salon can either use a disposable cutting cape, which I would highly recommend. That way, you cost that expense into the treatment and they leave with their cape. You don't need to then worry about the disposal or the cleaning of the cape. However, if you choose to use your traditional cutting capes, it is a clean cape for each person, and each cape needs to be washed with soap and water after every application. Okay.
Okay.
In terms of towels, you can use a towel. Again, the same methodology applies. 1 towel per person, and they have to be stored separately. In other words, if the towel is wet, it must go into a specific container so that you know that theoretically the towel is contaminated. So they're not sitting with other dry towels where there's a cross-contamination.
And can
Those towels,
it normally like you would in a washing machine with washing powder?
you could wash them in a washing machine with washing powder. I would suggest also have them dry out in the sun. You want them to be nice and bone dry, and also be exposed to proper ventilation.
Yeah.
One of the areas in the risk survey is I have to assess the ventilation of the area where people are working. It forms part of the risk survey. So sufficient ventilation is a criteria, and that's why also by doing a risk assessment at the salon, I'd be able to advise them if the ventilation that they offer is suitable. While we're discussing ventilation, no heaters and no air cons.
Wow.
The air con is a breeding ground for viral and bacteria particles.
Wow.
So it might be advisable to say to your clients, if they feel the cold, to bring their own hot water bottle or to bring a lightweight blanket. Bearing in mind that whatever those items touch, you need to sanitize.
Yes.
Okay. Another thing that came up in one of the trainings that I did at a salon last week was, what about your client's handbag?
Ah, good
Bearing
point.
in mind that the handbag has been all over, been at other shops, it's been on the floor of bathrooms, all sorts of places. So my recommendation is, please ask your clients. They're only allowed to bring their car keys, their bank card, and their cell phone in with them. That their cell phone is to stay in their pockets or locked in their vehicle. Because bearing in mind that that cell phone has also been exposed and touched by many things, and the more that they bring of their personal items, the more exposure and the higher the risk of COVID being on any surface.
Wow.
So
At this stage, they're not allowed to flick through their phones while they're having their hair done, and they can't be reading any magazines either.
there must be no magazines or books available in the salon at all.
Yes.
Okay. We know that COVID as a virus can stay on an unsanitized surface for up to 9 days.
Oh,
9 days.
wow.
That was shared with me from the Labour Guide.
Wow. That's
Okay,
incredible.
so let's move on. So we've discussed the capes and we've discussed the towels. Any products that are waste material, such as cotton wool, foils, things like that, that needs to be disposed of in a dustbin bag that has like a drawstring finish, not a traditional bag. And
Yeah.
that contents needs to then go into an additional bag and disposed of properly. We need to be cognizant that there are certain people in our community that go through the dustbins. You cannot be found to be disposing of any of your products negligently and indirectly exposing people who are going through the bins.
So much to
Okay, so
think
that's,
about. Gosh.
yeah, that's just something to bear in mind.
Okay.
Okay. Then moving on, so that's pretty much is the PPE. Now, a lot of people are asking about thermometers. Yes,
Yes.
thermometers are required because taking the temperature is a vital part of tracking and monitoring the health status of your clients. And this goes back to notifying your client that they need to come a few minutes earlier to complete 2 documents. One is your COVID-19 intake form, which everybody has somewhere along the line experienced already. It's your name, it's your address, it's your contact number. Have you traveled? Have you been to an old age home? Have you got any flu-like symptoms, etc., as well as your temperature. All employees should be tracking their temperatures on the required documentation daily, and all clients should have their temperature taken before entering the salon. My recommendation to salons is to prepare your client outside of the salon as much as possible. If you want to sanitize the shoes, I haven't picked up anything in the new protocols, but it is highly recommended that you get yourself a cat litter tray with sponge, and you can put your bleach chemical with some water in the tray with the sponge, and your client just gently taps the sole of their foot or their shoe into that sponge to disinfect the bottom of the shoes.
And then that would
I
have to be
wouldn't,
dry.
Well, you would let it dry, yeah, while they're standing outside and they're actually filling in their documents and you're taking their temperature.
Yeah.
I wouldn't suggest using hand sanitizer in the tray because it's alcohol based, which means it's going to evaporate quickly and you're just going to have a lot of expense.
Yes. You know,
Okay.
one of the questions I'd like to ask when it comes to things like that, okay, so that's not a necessity, but when you think about also you going into the supermarket, you know, you might be using their pen and this kind of thing. I mean, how much more, you know, they weren't making you wear shoe covers when you go into the spa or the Pick and Pay. I mean, are you still, you know, there's differences. You know, how much, to what degree do we have to take it?
Okay. So one thing we need to bear in mind is that when you go into a Pick and Pay, you will notice it doesn't matter if you're buying a tub of yogurt, they make you take a trolley because that forces you to maintain social distancing. It's very difficult for somebody to cut your hair maintaining complete social distancing.
Oh,
So
yeah.
what we're trying to eliminate, and also in your shopping centers and in the stores, you're going in, you're purchasing your items, and you're leaving as quickly as possible. You're not sitting down, you're not hanging around, you're not staying, ideally not staying in the store for extended periods of time.
Yes.
So in a salon environment, you could have potentially 3 to 5 stylists or operators and 3 to 5 clients. So that's about 10 people that are occupying a single space for maybe an hour
Yeah.
at the same time. So this is why the cleaning of the floor is so important and the cleaning of the shoes is because you're not going in and out and your exposure is not 10 minutes worth. It's maybe an hour's worth.
Yes.
However, Ursula, I do understand what you're saying is just how far do we take this? Because it can actually become like really time consuming. And
Yes.
we don't want people to get frustrated with the protocols and stop doing them because of the
Yes.
frustration or the time or the expense.
And do we need
So
those
while
dividers between the two chairs, or is it okay if you just leave one chair out and keep the gap? Or do you still need to put some kind of, some people have used kind of shower curtains or perspex stands between the chairs?
you can use shower curtains, you can use perspex stands. However, there's
Yes.
nothing in the current protocols that says that you have to have a screen
Okay.
between seats. You need social distancing between seats
Okay.
of 1.5 meters. So that space you have to have. However, at the counter, you need to have a screen.
Yes.
Okay. Because you've got direct face-to-face contact, whereas also being in the chair, the person is predominantly working with the back part of your head and the back part of your body. So the exposure of saliva and mucus particles is somewhat diminished from the back of the head.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
So just
And
getting back to the floor and the shoes, it is recommended to have a bleach container for shoes, but it's not part of the department's requirements either. However, the cleaning of the floors on a regular basis, and a regular basis is not once a day. It's 3, if not 4 times a day,
wow.
especially the floor area. And that again, I would recommend the bleach. So if the salon does not want to have the container with the dipping for the shoes, I would strongly suggest very regular cleaning of the floors. And what is important to consider is the mop that you use. That mop needs to be correctly stored as well.
Wow.
Okay. Because it needs to be seen that it could be carrying bacteria or virus. So in terms of the mop, you would use it normally and then put it away in the kitchen or in an area that people are not going to be touching it unnecessarily or bumping it over and picking it up with their hands. And this is how stringent one needs to be is that part of your cleaning process, when you clean in the kitchen, you need to clean and sanitize the handle of the mop because you're touching it so much.
Yes. Okay.
So this is all part of the training that, you know, as you know, Salon Central and myself offer to the salons, because there are a whole variety of extra pieces that we don't think about that need to be thought out during this process. And one of the documents that are needed in the safety file around COVID is called your COVID management plan. And this is quite a thorough and concise document that the salon needs to compile and have in their file according to the Department of Labor as an employer to indicate how they plan to manage this pandemic in their salons.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's very, very thorough. You know, so people can take the 17-page document protocols and they can work that out for themselves and go through it.
Yeah.
There might be some gray areas that they're not sure of, but if there's people that really want to know a much more in-depth, you would actually travel to their salon, you will stand up in front of them, you'll give them the file, you'll go through all the forms, you will show them what they need to do at the door, where they need to keep this, how to do their ventilation, etc., etc. And if there's anybody who's wanting to have a consultation and they're not like in the Gauteng area, you can do something in a virtual arena like this, like an online.
Yes, I can.
To
Sure.
help them out as well. Because I think there'll be some questions, you know, with the markings on the floors and the stickers, you know, there's so many stickers and there's so many signs. To me, I think there's too many. I don't know which ones you're meant to have, which ones you're not meant to have. And can you maybe adapt them to look pretty to match your salon? I would hate to have big red signage in my salon if my salon was a beautiful blush pink, just as an example. So, you know, those kind of things that people would need to know. Okay,
Yeah.
well, we've covered a lot. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to say.
Yeah, there's just one last point that I'd like to touch on, Ursula. You know, a lot of people, I've seen a lot of comments of things where people have said, you know, why should we pay for this information? Why should we pay these exorbitant fees and have this consult and this risk assessment? Well, this is what I'd like to share with the industry, and I share it with anybody who has these queries. What you're paying for is the absolute surety that you have everything in place that is required by the Department of Labor and Occupation, as well as your current protocols relating to your industry. It is the surety to know that what I leave behind with you will protect you from the inspector that comes. And if there is something that isn't in the file that has subsequently changed, because as we know, things do change from time to time, I'm always ready, able, and willing to jump in and either represent the salon or give you the documentation as I get it straight and hot off the press. Bearing in mind that health and safety is my passion. And what seems from time to time overwhelming to some is bedside reading for me.
Yes.
So I think in terms of what we're offering and what I'm sort of training in salons, this is about taking out the fear and taking out the feeling of, have I done enough and what happens if? One of the other things that I incorporate in the training, and I've done it successfully with earlier salons last week, is role playing with the client. Because we just think that people are going to be happy to come in and be shoveled around and move to this chair and now do this and hold this over your face. And we don't want you to pay now, you've got to do an EFT. These are big adjustments for clients, just as they are for us. So part of that training is some of the sensitivity training that needs to come with dealing with your clients now. And the fact that they don't get tea or coffee anymore.
Yeah.
They're used to that. And what happens if someone's in the salon and they start feeling ill? What do you do?
Yes.
If somebody feels like they're having a panic attack or they have an asthma attack, what do you do? Do you start touching them? Don't you touch them? There are all these elements to health and safety that we never had to think about before.
Yes.
So,
and remember also that the consumers, some of them are very scared also. They don't know if it's fine for them. So it's very important, I think, that everyone's using their social media to allay those fears and say, look, we've got all the protocols in place, or we've had a risk assessor in here. He has our certificate to show that we've had it done. We were looking after we would like you to bring your own mask for your own safety and well-being. But we have looked out for everything, and then, I 100% agree with you there. I mean, we've got to remember their fears as well. So
at the end of the day, Urs, what people are paying for in terms of engaging my service is they're paying for my expertise. They're paying for my up-to-date knowledge. They're paying for the correct file, which I deliver to them in its entirety. The training of the file, the training of the individuals on things like your toolbox talks, which you need to have, and training on how to just manage this situation on a day-to-day basis, and the surety that they've done it right.
Yes. Okay, well, I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much. So what we'll do is in the comments of this video, it will be saved onto the Hairstyle South Africa page. We will just put like contact email addresses or people where they can contact you directly to make appointments if they wanted to. And we are adding some information onto the Salon Central website, but we're still working on that. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm so glad, because I've known you for a very long time, about 20 years, or about 20 years.
About that.
Yeah. And for you to have come back into my life and have all this, exactly what people are needing right now, it's wonderful, and that's so helpful. And that is part of my ethos of my page, is that I want to help, and we want people to be successful. So I appreciate. We will leave your details in the video, and hopefully I can try and get people to watch the beginning video, and then, or maybe I will try and join them together because we had a glitch in between. But I think we got a lot of info out. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for your time, and I'm always open to comment and to questions from the industry. And it's important that we work together on this. Unification is important. There is lots of information freely available, and I by no means am discouraging that.
Yes.
And thank you.
100%. I agree with you on that. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody. Thank you.
So much, Ursula.
Thank you. Chat later.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody, for watching.